Who let the underdogs out? Kotler's crew cleans up at the West Coast Classic. Experience pays off on the men's side with a full house of Games vets. And the Invictus teams are the masters of their fates. In Asia, the Russians are ready for Madison. We recap the final day of semifinal competition next on Game Central. Hi everybody, welcome to a semifinals edition of Game Central. Sean Woodland and Annie Sakamoto recapping the final week of the semifinals. Three more competitions wrapping up on Sunday. The West Coast Classic, the Atlas Games, and the CrossFit Asia Invitational. Annie, across the board, there were some great races that came down to the final event.
Yeah, and I have to say, Sean, I have always enjoyed rooting for the underdog, but Bethany Shadburn, Carrie Pierce, and Danielle Brandon made it very easy to root for the underdog this weekend. Fantastic races across the board.
Day 3 of individual competition is presented by Fit Aid, the official recovery beverage of the CrossFit Games. Joel Godet and Tommy Marquez were on hand in Las Vegas at the West Coast Classic, and they have more on an exciting Day 3 for the women.
After 3 days of competition in Las Vegas, if you could say one thing about the West Coast Classic, it was reliable with the ladies. Tommy Marquez, Joel Godet. Tommy, coming into this, you had 3 women competing on their home turf here in Las Vegas, and then you had 2 top seeds, numbers 1 and 2, from CrossFit Invictus. Those are the 5 women that advanced to the CrossFit Games. Did that go as you saw it?
Well, experience wins out, right? If you look at the 5 women with the most individual experience at the CrossFit Games, they walk away as your 5 qualifiers, but maybe a little bit more tense, and a little more hotly contested than maybe we expected from some new names and up-and-comers.
When you talk about the women that train here in Las Vegas, that underdog athletics crew, Carrie Pierce gets all of the headlines because she finished on the podium most recently. But Bethany Shadburn is the one that walks away with the crown.
Yeah, Bethany Shadburn deserves all the credit for being so consistent across the weekend. The first 6 tests so far were all in the top 4 with a pair of event wins as well. And really, the fact that she could just cruise to another top 10 finish to walk away as the overall winner, outdueling her teammate and the reigning fittest woman in America, Carrie Pierce, I'm just excited to see what she can do at the Games. Carrie Pierce, coming off a podium finish, wasn't sure if she was going to compete this year, but still showcasing that she has plenty left in the tank, and she is absolutely a contender for another potential podium spot. Second place this weekend, gets to compete inside the top 5 all weekend long alongside her training partners. This is just a building block for another incredible run for Pierce at the CrossFit Games. What seems like just a few years ago when she made her appearance, she now has 7 appearances underneath her belt. Danny Spiegel, what a way to fight back. I mean, things looked bleak after the ruck run. She finished 27th and didn't even go out for the final lap. But you know what? She's a fighter. She bounces back with an event win to close day number 2 and comes up huge with another top 5 finish in the finale to the weekend to stay in the top 5 and earn her trip back to Madison.
Danielle Brandon and Reagan Huckabee are the other 2 that eke into the final 5, and it could have been Alexis Raptis, but it came down to the very end, and seconds and inches matter.
Alexis Raptis had a miss on the final barbell. That opened up the door for Kelly Stone and Brianna Wallen to beat her to the finish line. In a matter of just a fraction of a second, could have made all the difference for Alexis Raptis. 11 points separate her and Huckabee in 5th. Such a close race and a heartbreaking turn of events for Alexis Raptis, but plenty to hang her hat on.
So it's the 3 underdogs that go 1, 2, 3, then Spiegel and Huckabee, the Invictus training partners, Raptis, Wilson, and Kelly Stone, who was the 28th seed out of 30 women competing in this field, advance to the Last Chance Online Qualifier 2 weeks from now. Tommy, you look at the way that the field breaks down now heading into the CrossFit Games. You've got a really strong contingent of 5 that come from the West Coast Classic. How do you like the chances of these ladies once they get to Madison?
Well, you have to love what they put down on the competition floor this weekend in terms of building their way to Madison, because they do have those brand names behind them, the Underdog Athletics crew, the Invictus crew. They have some big contingent of Games athletes that are going to be training around them for the CrossFit Games as well, pushing them day in and day out. And even though they have the least amount of time to prepare, I mean, they showcase they're more than ready to step up to the plate and have a huge performance in a little over a month.
Awesome competition, phenomenal showing, particularly on the women's side here in the desert. Let's go back to you guys.
Thank you, Joel and Tommy. A lot of vets on the women's side inside the top 5, and it's the same story for the men. Nothing but Games veterans finishing in spots 1 through 5. Cole Sager, he is your overall winner. He had one finish outside of the top 5, and events 2 and 3 were really where he made his money.
Right, and actually, Cole led this competition from event 2 on. Like you said, all top 5 finishes except for that final event. He won the legless 13 and the ruck run. Here's what I love about Cole Sager, though. This was his first Father's Day. He wins the first West Coast Classic to qualify for his 8th consecutive games. Cole Sager, he is all heart, he is all smiles, and it's really hard not to root for him and be excited to see his return to the games.
Joel and Tommy talked about the comeback that Danny Spiegel had. Brandon Luckett had a really nice comeback as well. After event number 1, he had that elbow injury. We didn't even know if he was going to be able to compete. End of the weekend, he's going to the games.
Right, Sean. I pretty much thought he was out of the competition, considering that he was walked off the floor by the medics. Well, he comes in and he claws his way back by getting all top 10 finishes, except for the last event as well. But that was still his 13th place finish in that event was still enough to help him re-qualify. And again, it's never fun to see somebody leave the competition floor injured, especially when it's on the first event. So to think that he was able to qualify, congratulations to Brandon Luckett.
Spencer Panchik unable to complete the Panchik hat trick, but he is still alive. He's going to the Last Chance Qualifier, and he used a really strong finish to get there.
Definitely. There's only 2 going, but what a showing from Panchik. He was actually 20th after that ruck run, and I honestly thought he was out. He needed some really big finishes in an effort to make his way at least to the Last Chance Qualifier. That's exactly what he did, starting with a win on that Triple G chipper. Although he didn't qualify, he qualified for the Last Chance Qualifier, and I have to say that I'm rooting for him because it would just be so much fun to see all 3 Panchik brothers. It would be the first time 3 siblings were at the games at the same time. So I gotta say I'm rooting for him. Phenomenal performance this weekend after finding himself in a pretty big deficit after day 1.
Let's go to the team competition where we've talked about experience for both the men and the women, and it's the same story again for the teams. The 2 Invictus teams, they were dominant throughout the weekend, and it doesn't really matter the year, the format, the amount of people you're sending on a team, but Invictus just cranks out great teams.
Yeah, it basically pays to be in green when you're on a team, Sean. Both of these teams, so both Invictus and Unconquerable, had all top 5 finishes except for 1 finish, and actually only 8 points separated them at the end of the competition. Not just a strong team, but strong teams. They're really sending 8 athletes to the games, if you ask me, and these are 2 teams that I think could give Mayhem a run for their money when we're in Madison.
The Ohio Brutes, they are another team that earned a qualifying spot to the CrossFit Games, and they really got themselves back on track after a slow start.
Yeah, so actually one of their athletes on the ruck run collapsed, and they had to help carry her out of there. That was CC Piper. And so coming into this final day of competition, they really needed to have some big finishes in an effort to qualify for the games. That's exactly what they did. They won event 6, which was a huge event for them. And it was CC Piper who was really pushing her male counterpart on those deadlifts. And then they got a 4th place on that final event, which was just enough to get them a spot to the games.
The team competition is sponsored by Romwad. Improve your mobility and athletic performance with Romwad. Visit romwad.com for a free 7-day trial. There was so much great stuff at the West Coast Classic, but what stood out to you the most?
For me, Sean, so I actually participated in the regionals when they were the West regionals, which then, kind of became the West Coast Classic. And so this event is really near and dear to my heart, and a lot of these athletes actually were at that event. And just to see the live competition, to see so many veterans qualify, but to see so many young and new faces make a bid, and really some exceptional performances. And obviously for it to be live competition was it just gets me so excited for the games,
Absolutely.
right?
The West Coast Classic was the only live semifinal competition of this weekend. The other 2 were virtual. We'll take a look now at the other 2, and we will start with the Atlas Games. And on the team side, the top 5 really dominated throughout. In fact, 4 of the top 5 had clinched a spot at the games after just 5 of the 6 events. For the women's side, Carolyn Prevost had a pretty exciting weekend, won the first 2 events and then would eventually fall outside of the top 5. She wins the final event to get herself back on top of the overall leaderboard. Mackenzie Riley qualifies as well, and then Bailey Rail and Sydney McCallishan, rookies going to the games. And then on the men's side, the story is Brent Fikowski. Started in 15th place after the first 2 events. He pulls off the comeback, going back to the games. We were standing here after day number 1 thinking he might be done. He's in 15th place, but did exactly what he had to do in the final 2 days, and here he is going back to Madison.
Right, and this was kind of reminiscent of stage 1 of the games last year, where he dug himself into a hole. Unfortunately, last year he couldn't dig himself out, whereas this year, like you said, Sean, he was 15th on day 1. Well, the win in event 4 helped move him into 7th place, so at the end of day 2 he was in 7th. Then his win on event 5 moves him into that 5th and final qualifying spot, and his 4th place on that final event was just enough to hold onto it, beat out Tyler Christoffel, and punch his ticket back to the game.
Bailey Rail is 25 years old, had a really solid performance in the World Wide Open, and then goes on to finish 3rd in the Atlas Games. A Mayhem athlete, and now we have another Mayhem athlete we got to keep track of at the CrossFit Games, but no surprise that a Mayhem athlete is going to Madison.
Right, so Bailey's actually a collegiate golfer and a 2-time Games team member, but I think you nailed it, Sean. What really stands out is that she's a Mayhem athlete, and there's just something special in the air at Mayhem, and so the fact that she was able to do these semifinal workouts at Mayhem with, with Mayhem athletes judging her, around her, supporting her, that's where I think she really gained the advantage in this competition. And she talked about even, some adversity that she had to face over the weekend, but having these seasoned athletes by way of Mayhem was a huge advantage for her.
And finally, with the teams, we've seen a lot of dominant team performances over the past couple of weeks in the semifinals. Pro 1 Montreal is now in that category. They won 4 of the 6 events, and they had 570 out of a possible 600 points.
They absolutely dominated the competition, and that was over a field that was also very consistent. Yes, they had a 6th place finish, which was a little mar on their mark for me, but they most impressively finished that event 5, which unofficially across all other semis, they were the only team to finish that event. It was just a long, grueling event that, yes, it had a 40-minute time cap. No other teams to date were able to finish it, and they were the only one that did.
Congratulations to all the individuals and teams from the Atlas Games heading to the 2021 Noble CrossFit Games. The CrossFit Asia Invitational, that is the final competition that took place this weekend. It was virtual, and the Russians sweep the top spots. Two spots for the men, the women, and the teams at the CrossFit Asia Invitational. And it was pretty clear early on who the contenders for all of those positions were going to be.
Right. While there was some shuffling here and there on the leaderboard, really we were looking at the same names all weekend, Sean. So no surprise that the 2 men, the 2 women, and the 2 teams that came out on top were who they were.
Day 3 of individual competition is presented by Fit Aid, the official recovery beverage of the CrossFit Games. Here are your overall standings now after 6 events for the women. Svetlana Kubershkina winds up in 1st place. Xiangyang Choi will finish in 2nd, and she holds off Svetlana Veselova by 8 points. For the men, a pair of Russians on top of the overall leaderboard. Stas Soledov and Alexander Elin, as Roman Krenikov will keep his season alive. He finishes 3rd. Roman Krenikov still going to the Last Chance Online Qualifier, but a little surprising not to see him in 1st place overall.
Yeah, I was really surprised, Sean, as he has really been the dominant male Russian athlete thus far as CrossFit competition goes. And he had all top 10 finishes all weekend, but for him, it just came down to the fact that both Soledov and Ilin were just more consistent and a bit better across the whole weekend.
Yeah, and speaking of Stas Soledov, 1 ticket to the games wasn't enough. He's already qualified in the 35 to 39-year-old division, and now he can compete as an individual.
Right, and actually I had to check this. He was 13th worldwide in the Open this year. Again, 36 years old, like you said. He's already punched 1 ticket to the games as a master. Now he punches his 2nd ticket to the games. I'm assuming he would go as an individual, but you never know, Sean. For him, he may feel like he could be more competitive as a master athlete. So I'll be very interested to see which ticket he decides to use.
Yeah. Over on the women's side, Sung Young Choi, she got into the top 2 after the second day and then put up a really good fight and managed to hang on to that spot.
Yeah, and this is on her career best open finish. She finished 44th worldwide in the open this year. Sung Young did really good. She had all top 8 finishes, and this is for an athlete that really has no regionals nor sanctionals experience. So to put together a full weekend like this, really impressive. Maybe it had something to do with where she was doing these workouts. Look at how beautiful that is. And it was great. Just added another flag to that leaderboard this weekend.
The team competition at the CrossFit Asia Invitational is probably the least tension-filled one we had. The top 2 teams were the top 2 throughout the entire competition. Between Kolesnikov and Team Dubai, they won every single event. We spent the past 2 nights talking about Kolesnikov quite a bit. They have a loaded roster. What do we know about Team Dubai?
Right, Kolesnikov was definitely dominant in this competition, but Dubai was so consistent. All top 4 finishes, including 3 event wins. And 2 members were actually CrossFit Games 19 national champions. So not surprising, this was a team that we had chosen to be one of the favorites going into the competition. Like you said though, between Kolesnikov and Dubai, they just ran away with this competition.
Yeah, team competition is sponsored by Ramwad. Improve your athletic performance and mobility with Ramwad. Visit ramwad.com for a free 7-day trial. It does look like the Asia Invitational is going to send some athletes to the games who can be competitive, especially those 2 teams that we just talked about.
Definitely. I mean, Kolesnikov was 3rd worldwide in the Open this year, just behind Mayhem and Invictus. So definitely a competitive team and definitely some competitive athletes. And you never know until you're in live competition and you can really compare everybody side by side how good everybody is. And so I'm excited to see all of these athletes go toe to toe.
The semifinals are now officially over. There is one more stop before we get to the CrossFit Games, and that is the Last Chance Online Qualifier, and that will take place the weekend of July 3rd. We will have full coverage of that, and then it is straight on to Madison, Wisconsin, and the 2021 Noble CrossFit Games, and tickets are still available if you want to be there in person at the Alliant Energy Center. You can head to games.crossfit.com for more information on that. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this final weekend of semifinal action. For Annie Sakamoto, I'm Sean Woodland, and we'll talk to you soon.